Alright, we're going to look at a way of taking and reflecting back the sky in the scene. So if you look here in the scene, I have the sky texture, but I have these windows, and if I look in the window, I don't see any of the sky. So this is a way of making this glass actually glass, and it just adds quite a bit to the level actually. So let's kind of look at it. Here in the content browser, I'm just looking at my material for the glass. Here it is. Okay, in this case, I'm going to actually need the sky too. So how do I find the sky? Well, if you click in the scene, you can right click and say find in content browser. This will find the sky. And if you use textures, you'll find the sky there. Now, we don't want the moon to appear in every scene because that would look weird, but we do want the stars. I think that would look neat. So I'll click on that one. I'll right click here and say texture, new texture sample. So that'll bring that in. Again, you can use T and left mouse or that, doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm just going to break this connection to the color, and I'm actually going to break it to this one too. So we saw math was used in the last video. In this case, I need these two textures added together. Okay, once I have both of them in there, I can add that to diffuse. You'll note that a lot of times if you take and put two of these together, or just one of them together, you'll get a big old fat error message. So I always kind of wait till both of them are plugged into the add, and then over here. Anytime I do not have that, I get this. Okay, so instead of just going right into the add, we'll also need a way of masking out most of the other stuff here, and what we can use is a mask. Okay, and you'll notice in UVs I have a little plug. What does that go? What goes into UVs? So mask, a little harder to find, so I just type in mask and use component mask. Now this has two values, R and G. Now we could have just used a reflection vector, but watch what happens. So a reflection vector has three, R, G, and B. It doesn't say that anywhere, but I know that because if you plug this into UVs, you get this big fat error message. And again, if I see float 3 versus float 2, I know that I'm taking the RGB value and trying to plug it into a two-dimensional world. So this one doesn't work on RGB, it works on UV, which is 0 to 1. We don't have a third vector for UVs. It's X and Y, up and down, or 0 to 1 ratio. Doesn't work. So if you take this, for example, and plug it in to this, it kills the RGB and only uses the R and G. So the R and G can be plugged into the UVs, and now I have this. Now this works out quite well. If I just use, let's say, this and this, I get a pretty nice value. Let's look at the glass. Now you can see the sky being reflected in the glass. The only thing I don't like about this is it needs to be toned back a little bit. And I like having the glass a little bit semi-transparent. This hardly has any semi-transparency. So let's add some more math to this. Let's go to a multiply. And in the multiply vector, I'm just going to add that to opacity. Plug in my alpha. And I'm going to add a little bit more gray value to this. So I can right click here, go to vectors, and I'll say 2 vector, sorry. Alright, so with 2 vectors, it looks like this. I'm going to put a value in here of like 0.3 or 0.4. So what will happen is, it's taking and adding a little bit more gray to the alpha. Again, you could do that in Photoshop very easy. You use the fill tool. But here, you can do it also without going all the way back to Photoshop and doing that. Another thing is, you know, in this scene, this works. In another scene, this might not work well. So you might want to think about making a material for night, making a material for day. If you did that in Photoshop, you would ruin the original texture. Here you will not ruin it. Alright, so let's close that out. First save. And there we go. Now we have a little bit more semi-transparent look to it. If I back off, I see that sky. I have to add that sky to this one also, because this is something I experimented with earlier, and I didn't add the same sky texture. So back to my package 01 warehouse, and I'll go to materials. So materials, no textures, and here's that one. Okay, in this case, I add the same node, and also I need a different texture sample right here. Okay, so back to UDK, back on clicking on the sky, right click and say find in content browser. This is the skipping around process that I hate so much. So here's texture sample. T left click. And I'm just substituting this, breaking this link, and adding this to this. There we go. So same node, same everything, and the glasses match next to each other. Very important. Especially with this scene, because they wouldn't have taken the time to make depression glass on this factory in one instance, and then maybe some kind of higher grade glass in the bottom. They used very plain materials in something like this. You might want to make a few static meshes that are a bit different. So for this window mesh, I might want to add one to my collection that has the UVs moved a little bit, so I'm not getting the same repeated pattern over and over. That's another thing. But once you have this one start wall and it's starting to look good next to each other, you should probably do this. So build lighting. I always use a quality of high right here because that's going to be my best case scenario, just to see if everything's going together good. If you're starting to see a black line, that means your mesh is just a little bit in Z. So I have to kind of move it ahead a little bit next to each other. I can't do it right now because Lightmass is running, but you should have very little warnings. These are Lightmass warnings, so they don't really count. There we go. See, so the black line's gone now, and all the meshes are kind of lining up next to each other. So that's your goal, is to get something that looks like this. Alright, so move on to the next video where I explain your assignment.